Okay, are there any questions from your discussion group? Any points that have come up you'd like to clarify? Okay, yeah. Yes, sir. What do you mean? Say more detail. I don't quite get it. What do you, okay. You mean the length of life? Yeah, because, that's what I'm, of course. The karmic, not even before that, sweetie pie, it's the time you conceive, before you even, when you die. Listen, when you die, the karmic seed that will determine the life you will have, right? Plus all the other karmic seeds that will ripen, that will be the personality, the experiences, the sickness, the health, of this, they're all already there before you even pass away the previous death. Why would it? I mean, if you think about it, the quality of that seed has to already be there. It's not as if, it's sort of like the karma's already there. It's a long time in advance that these things are kind of, you understand? It's not to the time you're born. Things can change this, variations. Like if you spend your life killing, you shorten your lifespan. If you spend your life purifying doing lots of practice, you can lengthen your lifespan. But you can't radically change it. It's pretty much determined. That's how come that's how come the baby in the womb dies before she's even born. Because the karma ran out. That was the seed that was the karma that was already determined by the time she even left her past life. You can say pretty much that. If you think it through, if it was just all this mental energy propelling forward, bringing certain results. So, you create the cause, be born to that particular mother, in that particular body, with that particular environment, and those particular experiences, and those particular genes, and that particular tendency to get cancer, already that's determined by the karmic seed that'll ripen, and the other one, they all kind of come around about the same time, before you even stop breathing. So if I think of it, it seems reasonable that the karma's there. And then you just, the seeds are planted a long time ago. And the length of life is simply to do with the throwing karma and the amount of morality. Like say as a human, the amount of morality that's there, how long it lasts, how much in the tank, which is the length of your life. Other things can affect it, but it's pretty fairly much there. I would imagine. I would think it's a good way to say it, if it takes a few years, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Johnny, what? I heard the first part. What was the second part about Tibetan astrology? By the Tibetans, yeah. Yes, astrology, yes, yes. And what do they? Yes, that's what all they're seeing. What they're seeing is the extent of the length of your karma. Yeah. They're seeing that. I don't know. I've never had my chart done by them. I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know. Yeah, I mean that can be predicted. If you're clairvoyant, you can see this. One can see what's going to happen in the future. That's the thing. What clairvoyance is capable of. And if we haven't got that, then there are other ways of indicating. So astrology is a way of tuning into whatever. However the Tibetan astrologers work, I don't know. But there's other ways of looking into other factors to determine this can be seen, right? Pretty much. Yeah. Mm. Right. Uh-huh. Right. Sure. No, I think it's a bit of a way of, maybe the wrong way to think of it this way, Mark. The fact is, the status quo now, unless we're already highly realized beings, the status quo is that most of what we do, even us, even good people like us, most of what we do is deeply instinctively motivated by attachment. It's just the way it is because it's so ingrained. So that's if you don't ever. So then the only thing to do is like with the lunch, without thinking, default mode is attachment. So what do? We sit there and we consciously put into the mind altruistic thoughts for eating dinner. Do you understand? But still, you get down there and someone just took the last piece of bread. Just because you decided you're going to do it with bodhicitta doesn't mean that that's going to totally transform you. You're going to get upset because they look at the task. So, of course, attachment's very deep. So we've got to keep practicing putting in the new motivation until eventually that one takes, and that'll overcome the negative one eventually, which is the instinctive one. So, of course, but you can't say, I thought my motivation was good. You can't play around. You either decided that you're going to do it with bodhicitta, which is a thought only at this point, or you did it. So you can't say, I thought it was good. You have to know. It's very practical. You have to decide. And that's why in a practice, in the Tibetan tradition, you have certain prayers and these things where you state these things. And that's what you make your motivation that. Everything in you is crying out to have it for you and want you and be selfish and all the rest of that's automatic. But you've got to add on top of it the virtuous motivation. Of course it's going to show in the other. It just takes time. It's like you've got to decide, I'm going to play that note on the piano. Well, you do. You put your finger on there, but I mean, it takes a lot of effort to get it to perfect it, isn't it? It takes years to perfect that piece of piano. And what'll take over spontaneously is the not able to play piano. You have to struggle and struggle and struggle. Well, it's the same to make this motivation genuine, where it really does finally, truly govern what you do. That's advanced. So be patient and humble. Now, just a minute. Just, Mark, you're doing exactly the same as you did before. What do you mean try to do the greater good by everybody? What do you mean by that? Sorry, what? I don't get what you mean, but it seems just a big point. What are you saying here? Well, then, no, it's not appropriate. You have to tell your private life choice. So what are you saying is you tried to do an action to help a person, or is it many people? What are you saying? What? Sorry, what? You decided to do an action that you thought would be of benefit to many people. You thought that. And then you discovered that in fact it wasn't. Well, then you learn from your mistakes, dear. You're not perfect. Just because you meant well doesn't mean it was the right thing, because you haven't got wisdom, baby. This is the point about a person meaning well when you kill a mouse. Of course you mean well, but you didn't have the wisdom to see that it in fact was the beneficial thing. That's a different discussion. Be clear. Motivation's fine, but you've got to have wisdom as well. So the wisdom is what will make you certain to do the right thing. Compassion is the wish to do the right thing. But then you must learn from your mistakes and realize it was just attachment. You made a mess. It's perfectly fine. What? You mean you did a bad thing? You hurt people? Whatever. You mean people suffered as a result of this action? Is that what you're saying? What? No, Mark, listen to me. You're getting so confused. Listen. Just because a person suffers as a result of something you did, it doesn't follow that you caused it. So, let's say you and I are having a relationship and you realize the time is to leave, it's finished, the karma's over. And I'm completely devastated that you leave me. You did not, your wish was to truly do the right thing, to do what's most beneficial. You had no wish to harm me. Because I suffer has got nothing to do with what you did. That's my problem. You did not cause it. So you have to see, like if you went and killed the mouse, yes, indeed, you must realize that, and then you send it to the lower realms instead. You must take responsibility for that, even though you meant well. So it's not enough to mean well, as Mum was over there. So if the thing that you did harm other people, and if it was really something that was harmful, then okay, take responsibility. But everything, just because the person doesn't like what you did, it doesn't follow that you caused it. So you have to be very clear, depending on the situation. Huh? Okay then. If you did it out of the best motivation, then that you have to put, like your mother wants you to, if you lived inside them, if our mummies adore us and attached to us, they'd like us to live in the same bed with them. Then they still wouldn't be satisfied. If their attachment is so strong, they just want us around them. That's what attachment is. It's a bottomless pit. But, no matter what you do, you can't make your mummy happy. But that's not your fault. That's your mother's attachment's fault. So you've got to be clear. Don't be all holy-woly and pretend you're being such a holy, but you're really a creep. Just do what you do out of a sincere motivation. Don't rabbit on about it. Don't describe it to everybody. Don't defend yourself. Just do it and learn and take the consequences. But you've got to realise, your motivation is one thing, and that does determine the karma you create. But the best action will be not only to have compassion, but to have wisdom to know it is the right thing. And we have to learn that slowly. And inevitably, things we do will harm somebody, or they will suffer because of it. That's not us harming them. Now, if you left this person because you're cheating and lying, then indeed you did create negative karma, and you must act on with your part, but not necessarily for their amount of suffering. So it's very tricky to own our part and let the other person have their part. We have to be very clear. What? Well, you don't say it. You be quiet. You don't say it. You don't say it. That's arrogant. Shut your mouth and apologise and accept the blame. Huh? That's right. Or whatever in your mind here. Someone else? I'm lost, baby. You mean just because you decide, do you mean just because you decide to do something, does it follow that you'll be able to do it? Like what? Like what? They die, they get their leg broken. What are you saying? Huh? Okay, somebody left somebody. All right then. Which person? Then? It's the delusion, sweetheart. It's how much attachment you have. It's very simple. It's how much attachment they have. It's how much attachment they have. If a person hasn't got much attachment, then they'll be sad, but they'll be able to get over it and accept reality and move forward. If a person's got a lot of attachment, then you'll get into blame and bitterness and resentment and not fair and how dare and poor me and all the rest. It's their mind, their attachments we have. What? Because their attachment is strong and they're just stuck in that's all. When your attachment's strong to a thing should have been a certain way, that means that shouldn't have happened. How dare they? And that gives rise to anger. Then it's obvious. You stay stuck. And that's what, look at the world, look at our minds, So what practice is, when you have the view of karma, 1, and 2, you see your delusions. Karma means the stuff that ripens in front of you. The boyfriend leaving you. The person being mean. Criticizing you at work. That's the stuff that pops up every day, isn't it? That comes at us. The person giving you $1 million, whatever it might be, that's coming at us. This is the stuff that's coming at us as a result of what we've done in the past. Then we have a way of dealing with it, which is the stuff in our mind, isn't it? So you work on both things. You're dealing with your attachment, but in the context of interpreting it as your past karma. This is the end. It's because of this and therefore this. And so then that helps you accept the reality of it and lessen the attachment. There's two parts of our practice. looking at our mind every day and how it responds to what's out there, and then changing that. Do you understand? Huh? You sure? No, sorry. What do you mean the imprint of that attachment? What do you mean? Sweetheart, it takes time to develop new habits. So if you try to develop a new habit of giving up attachment, it takes time. It's like trying to learn to play the piano. It takes time to perfect it. You've got to start somewhere. It's a process, isn't it? And it'll never happen if you don't start the process. And again, if we look at this way of I was saying before, that everything is view. Let's say you have the view that a marriage should last forever. As long as you stick to that view, then you might be able to forgive them, but it won't. It'd be very hard because they always do something. It's wrong that they left you. It's wrong that they divorced. It's wrong they did this. It's wrong. And then especially if you believe that God will punish you, all these things, all the view really makes it impossible to change. But if you have a view, let's say, of karma, which is that there's a karma between you and me, and then the karma ran out, for whatever reason, or you fell in with somebody else, okay, what to do? Then you're much more realistic and you accept it. This is reality. One of the things that Buddha says is that with our stubbornness and with our attachment and with our delusions, we can't see reality. And what reality here in this sense simply means is that you've left me. So attachment is, you shouldn't have left me, and if only you didn't leave me, and why did you leave me, and how dare you leave me, and then the anger. They're all the ifs and the buts and the shoulds, not the is. The is you've left me. And if I didn't have attachment, I'd get over it quite quickly because I'd recognize the reality that you've left me. But the delusions live in denial of this and think it shouldn't have happened, and why did it happen, you know? Do you understand? So we've got to be realistic in the simple sense that you have left me. You have left me. That's it. You've left me. Get over it, Robina. Okay, deal with my heart, heal the broken little heart, you know. But seeing the reality that you've left me, like my friends in prison, those who are still suffering. I just took two examples. One guy I can think of, I can't mention him, Mitch on death row. He's getting close to his death. He's dealt, for a long time, he's come to terms with the fact that he's on death row, in prison, and will die. Okay? So he's an amazing human being because he's dealt with reality. So he's working on himself and becoming a marvelous human being. Another friend of mine, just as long in prison, is still in deep agony about being in prison because he hasn't yet accepted the reality that this is his life. He's all the time, I shouldn't be here, and why am I here, and if only I'm not here, and I must, I find a lawyer, I'll do this. He's always miserable. Are you seeing what I'm saying? Because not seeing what is what is in front of me is part of the deal of attachment. Can't bear to see what's in front of me. Everybody else in the whole world could see that you don't love me anymore, except me, because I'm blind because of my attachment. If Nicole was really looking at Tom, she might have noticed that the signs were coming. But you can't see it when you're full of your own fantasy of what something is. It blinds you from seeing what reality is. In reality, in the simplest sense, that's what's happening. And this is what anger is. Anger, you listen to the words of anger. The rage when your attachment doesn't get what you want. It shouldn't happen. How dare it happen? Why did it happen? If only it didn't happen. That's what anger is. It's not looking at the fact that it is happening. So attachment and anger are the problem. Attachment sees a fantasy and yearns and desperately wants it to be this way. And then aversion, when attachment gets thwarted, when you leave me, aversion, which is either deep depression or violent external anger, want to go and kill you, is it shouldn't be happening. And how dare it happen? Listen to what anger says. So when you really have the view of karma and you're working on your mind, anger would not arise. It just is not an option. It's simply not an option. What? What? What you're talking about is compassion. It's got nothing to do with anger, but we mix them up. The reason to help somebody is compassion, not anger. Mostly we do it out of anger. We think anger is virtuous. We confuse it with compassion. One time, one person in an interview with His Holiness said, you know, well, it looks like anger really is productive. This, how dare this happen? Get out there and change it. It looks wholesome. But as he said, Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean. But when the motivation is actually compassion, which is the part that says, what can I do to help? But we mix the, how dare that happen, I'm going to change it. We mix the anger part with compassion. They're not the same at all. And as His Holiness said, when it's really coming from compassion, anger, you eventually give up. But compassion, you'll never give up. And compassion, I remember Martin Luther King saying, it blew my mind. He said, it's all right to be angry, meaning it's all right to say, that is bad. How dare there be racism? But then you say, what can I do to help? That's compassion. And the reason to want to make it different is compassion. Now, I remember this friend of mine, Tibetan, Jigdol, I mentioned, one of 13 children, remember? Did I say that here? His parents made many Tibetans. And he's one of 13 kids. And so in 87, he was part of the uprising and demonstrating and shouting and yelling, you know. So you normally think of a person shouting and yelling, they're angry. But he got arrested, then he got imprisoned, then he got arrested again, came out, got arrested again, his friends had his head blown off. He then escaped. His father died, brother died. It was a lot of suffering. And I said to him, do you ever get angry? And he laughed. What do you mean angry? It's our fault. Meaning it's karma. So when you really have internalized the meaning of karma, really internalized, which is intellectual, then you know you created that situation. You know it with such certainty that to be angry with it means how dare that happen is absurd. You did it. So why say how dare it happen? It's ridiculous, plain ridiculous. So he didn't have anger, but he had the wish to change it, the compassion. Understand? It's a really important point to think about. It's very hard to see it. Anger really is just this insane, ridiculous response when attachment doesn't get what it fantasized. How dare? Anger is this rage. How dare that happen? Because we truly don't believe it should, which is the wrong view we have in our mind. Totally, it comes from a complete misconception that it shouldn't happen, that I'm an innocent victim. That's what anger is. It's very shocking to hear it, but it really takes time to unpack. So of course you must get out there and help to the extent that you can. But often there's nothing we can do to make it better. And partly, much of the time, when terrible things happen, we do have compassion, but because we have a lot of attachment to have nice things, attachment can't bear the thing out there. This is very hard to see. We do have compassion. We want the world to be a better place, but our attachment is why we have problems, not because of compassion. Because attachment only wants nice things. It's addicted to nice things. So then we get upset when nice things don't happen. That's why we suffer. And then we just want to bury our heads in the sand because we can't cope. So that's what I want to do, is talk a bit more about the mind, these delusions, which we're doing actually. So really, like I'm saying, if you really look into karma very deeply and see how it's what the mind does from moment to moment and how it produces our experiences, and then we look at the mind itself, you've really got the nuts and bolts of Buddhism down, I tell you. Not to mention compassion yet. But if you do this, you've really got the fundamentals of Buddhist practice, Buddhist philosophy very clear. And so like I said, Buddha's saying the mind is not physical. It's not as if it's some piece of you can point to, like your brain. It's a very subjectively used word in Buddhism. It's referring to the process of your thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious. This entire process of your inner experiences. This is mind or consciousness. Not physical. Is an intimate relationship with the body, with the brain, but is not those things. And more, like I mentioned, I'm reading this book called The Undead. It's really mind-blowing, some of the research they're doing, and the experiences of people coming alive after being called dead, and near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and more, as many of the conclusions of some of the scientists is that it's clear that consciousness is not a function of the brain. Just coming to the conclusion. I don't know what it is, but this is completely agreeing with the Buddha. All the experiences of near-death, out-of-body, completely fit with the Buddhist explanation. They're exact examples of what Buddha talks about in this model we're using here. Most interesting. Anyway, consciousness is not physical. And the crucial thing to know is that we've got the gross, this is this little model I'm talking, gross, subtle, very subtle. We've got the gross level of consciousness, which is what functions from day to day. Conceptual, sensory, on the basis of this body. And that's what we think exists. in the West. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of Buddha. And so I remember this, I think I mentioned this conference, one of these many Mind and Life conferences, amazing conferences, this organization called Mind and Life. You'll see their website, mindandlife.org. Been around for like 20, 30 years, organizing meetings of minds, basically, between the Dalai Lama and his mob and all the materialist scientists, and marvelous discussions coming out of this, marvelous findings coming out of this. Most of them have been published, and many of the findings now about neuroplasticity have come directly out of these, different meetings over the years. And so, the topic in 2003 in Cambridge and in the States, the topic was the capacity of the human mind to concentrate. So clearly, the materialist modern scientists basing their findings on the view that mind is the gross level, is conceptuality. They said maybe 6 seconds or something. I don't remember what they said. Was the capacity. The Dalai Lama and his lot, basing, of course, their findings on this view of the Buddhas, that mind goes to this really subtle level of cognition. At even the subtle level, forget the very subtle, like we talk in the death process, but even at the subtle level, and that's even in this tantric model, subtle consciousness is a particular technical term for a certain level of consciousness, which is what is the dream state, is the mind that is out of the body. That's subtle consciousness, or the one the yogis can access through their meditation techniques. That this, which doesn't depend upon the physical body for its existence, which is why these out-of-body experiences or the near-death experiences can be true. And anyway, on the basis of this understanding of subtle consciousness and so on, that you can concentrate for quotes months on end. Now, this is taken even from the Hindus. This is not even talking Tantra. The Hindus were the ones who came up with this single point of concentration technique. And so all the great Hindu masters considered meditation for months. They wouldn't go to what's called technically subtle consciousness, but they go to a subtler level, the way they talk in the sutra techniques, And Buddha took this technique and ran with it, basically, and that's the main technique in the Buddhists that you use, that you need in high school to cultivate in order to get to subtler levels beyond the gross level of conceptuality, where the mind is far more refined and more subtle, where we then can really easily realize emptiness, unravel the nonsense and unpack it and see the truth. So in the long term for the Buddha, this is what we must do. We need to go to this subtle level of mind using these techniques in the long term to actually do the proper job that needs to get done. Right. So the other point about, and all the way, of course, and that's where you do the work of unraveling and unpacking and getting rid of all the misconceptions in the mind, which eventually leads us to see emptiness and then to perfect that and then to achieve Buddhahood. Again, the other point about the mind is that it doesn't begin at conception. It doesn't come from God. It doesn't come from mummy and daddy. These are the essential points about the Buddha's view of the mind. And all of Buddha's philosophy, metaphysics, psychology are all based upon this assumption. So, we need to take all of this as our hypothesis to really work with what Buddha's saying in a big picture point of view. And as because Buddha was a regular guy who came to these conclusions from his own direct experience, because he was a regular guy and we're regular people, then obviously we can just follow his instructions and we'll get to the same place. So obviously it's knowable. It's knowable. This is not some mysterious thing. First point about the mind. Second point about the mind, we can divide it into sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. And this already is most interesting. Because we are sensory beings living in this desire realm, our minds are conjoined with this bag of bones here that's made up of the 5 senses, and that's what drives us massively. As Lama Yeshe says, we make the body the boss. We're addicted to sensory feelings. These run our show for us. But they lie terribly. So I will say, oh, what a pretty cup, I'm thinking, and what I'm sort of meaning is that my eye consciousness is seeing a pretty cup. Well, it's not possible. Eye consciousness is like a dumb animal. It's profoundly limited in its capacity for cognition. all eye consciousness can cognize is shape and colour. That's it. Very limited. All ear consciousness, when I go, wow, far out, there's Miles Davis, and I hear that one trumpet note. No. All ear consciousness can cognize is mere sound. So where does Pretty Cup come from? Where does wow, Miles Davis come from? Well, in 1/1,000,000th of a second, quicker than Google, that information is instantly sent to the mental consciousness where the computer is, where the programming is, where the memories are, and out comes yellow, Chinese, and all the labels we know about, and then my memory of cups and the taste that I have in cups, and then it will appear to my mind as a pretty cup. All of that is all these stories, karmic imprints, basically. So many of them, but triggered within 1/1,000,000th of a second, quicker than Google. There's a pretty cup, I might say. So much, it's all information in here. The only thing eye consciousness can cognize is the shape and colour. The rest is from the mental consciousness. The mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa puts it. That's what we have to unravel and unpack. That's where all the happiness is and all the suffering. That's where the causes of happiness and suffering are. That's all the karmic imprints are. The memories, all of this. And this is what we have to learn to know. Okay, so this mental consciousness, as we discussed, is made up of 3 categories of states of mind. There's no 4th category. The first one is called positive state of mind. It's a technical term, not a moralistic one. The second one is called negative state of mind. And the third one is called neutral. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of neutral. They're not meaning not important. But they're states of mind that are neither negative nor positive. But they're crucial. Like I mentioned, mindfulness, short-term memory, you could say, is a bare bones function of the mind that makes it necessary to do things. But as Lama Zopa points out, thieves need it. So it's not in its nature good, and it's not in its nature bad. It's crucial, but it hasn't got the character of virtue or non-virtue, which have very specific functions for the Buddha. And these are the ones we really need to look into. And so the negative state of mind are the ones that are the main problem in the beginning. That's the main work in the wisdom wing, to identify these. And this again, like I'm saying, if we compare with the materialist models of the mind, Buddha is radically different. We don't hear it when we read all the Buddhist books. It all just sounds so cute and nice, mindful, attached, angry. It sounds so cute, Then you go to your serious psychiatrist for serious mental problems like bipolar and IDAD and EDID and God knows what. That's sort of serious psychology. Buddha's kind of cute, I mean, it's so insulting. It's so superficial. Buddha's model of mind hasn't changed in 2,500 years. And if it works to help you get enlightened, then why change it? So, okay. The negative states of mind have these 2 main characteristics. One is they're disturbing. The extent to which you have any of them at any moment, right there, disturbing, right there. So obvious, evident, painful, horrible, suffering. And the more of them, the more painful. Until literally mental breakdown. Look at the world. This is the nature and function of negative states. The other characteristic they have, which we've been implying the whole time and talking about, is that they're delusional, they're liars. And these 2 are the characteristics of these negative states. And they are the cause of all suffering, period. And Buddha's outrageous point is, as we've been hearing, they're adventitious. They're not integral to our being. They're not at the core of who we really are. Now, this one, we can happily talk for a week. Let's start talking about it here to try and see the logic of this. This is why Buddha would say every mind, as you said, as Dalai Lama said, every mind is naturally good, meaning we possess goodness. And this is Buddha's other point. So the negative states of mind are in our mind. My God, look at our lives. They run the show. Why? Because we've practiced them. They're habits. The positive ones are clearly there. This is why we're sitting in this room instead of out there at the gun club or something, or out there fishing. So the positive states of mind, this is Buddha's point. This is outrageous point. They are actually at the core of our being. They are indestructible. They cannot be removed from the mind. It's almost like saying, if H2O is what water is, you can't have water without H2O. You wouldn't have water because H2O is the contents of water, isn't it? You can't have water without H2O. It is water. Well, you could say, speaking simply, mind is the good qualities. The H2O of mind is the virtue. They're inextricable from mind itself. You can't have mind without virtue. It's a bizarre idea. It's like having water without H2O. So these are at the core of our being. This is fundamental to all Buddhist psychology, fundamental to all of Buddhist path, this understanding of mind. The good qualities are natural, insofar as you can't remove them from who we are. And you can cover them up. Check the lion. You know, that mummy lion is not expressing her love and compassion. She can't go anywhere near it. It's buried deep, but it's in there. The imprints are there. The negative states of mind are not the core of our being. And that's the point of all of Buddhist teachings. This is what everything is leading to, the eradication of those from the mind. So how is that technically possible? Let's just be logical, try and see if we can understand it. And the key to understanding how we can remove neuroses from the mind, the only way to understand that is to understand how they all come down to being views, concepts, thoughts, opinions, viewpoints, concepts. When we can get that, when we can understand that finally anger is an elaborate story, a conceptual story, jealousy, ego grasping, even the most subtle, they all come down beneath the emotions, beneath the instinctive habitual emotional component. When we get deeper into our minds and unpack and unravel, we get down to hearing how they are all conceptual stories. Now, so is love and compassion. But the difference is they are in sync with reality to some extent, whereas the negative ones, and this is the point, they're total rotten liars. They have no basis in reality whatsoever. To understand this, then we can see logically how we can achieve nirvana, achieve your enlightenment. Then it's logical, not just some mystical truth. It's logical. Okay, let's prove how we can remove thoughts from the mind. I will tell you, I will say to you, I have a red cup. You'll say, don't be ridiculous, Robina, it's a yellow cup, won't you? So, I've got a thought in my mind, haven't I? And the thought says, I have a red cup. Is that a thought or not? It is a thought, isn't it? And then you have in your mind another thought which says it's a yellow cup. You agree? So we have to say, oh God, they're both thoughts, right? But we have to deduce one is true and one is false. Because thoughts have to relate to something. You can just go, la-di-da-di-da. That's a thought, but kind of useless, isn't it? So thoughts have to relate. The Buddha's key thing is this. He wants us to get finally to see reality as it is, to see things as they exist, to see things without mistake. And that is an enlightened mind, finally, a mind that's in sync with reality. And so that mind can be manifesting very nicely in the human form, having lots of thoughts. But every thought they have will be a thought that is a valid thought. And a valid thought is a thought that is expressing truth. Well, okay, this is the whole business about how we establish what exists. We all accept that this is a cup. We've agreed in the English language, the thing that holds your tea is called a cup or mug, whatever. We also know this colour, because of the way we talk colours, and we've all got certain eyes that look certain things, we say that's yellow. So that's an acceptance, that's a conventional truth, which indicates the ultimate one. But never mind, conventional truth. We've agreed it's yellow. It's enough. It's a yellow cup in my hand. But I'm colourblind. I've got a mistake. I can't see the truth. I'm seeing a lie, aren't I? But the point I'm getting at is this. There is a thought in my mind that says, there, I have a red cup. You have a thought also that says, there is a yellow cup. Now, as we know from conventional reality, your thought is a thought, but it indicates something. It's in sync with some truth. The thought has to be in sync with a truth. My thought is not true. It is a thought, but it's not related to reality. So what will happen here? You won't just bully me into seeing it's yellow. You obviously know I've got a problem here, so I'll use a bit of dependent arising logic, and you'll check my eyes and check my glasses and check my understanding of the English language. You understand? And you'll fix the problem. You'll help me sort out the problem. And then I'll go again, and I'll go, oh, whoops-a-daisy, you're right, it's a yellow cup. One time. What happened to the thought? It's a red cup. Ceased. Precisely. What made it cease? Seeing true, which is there's a yellow cup. So if I'm doubting, well, you sure it's red? Nah, it's really red. Come on. I'm not sure yet. My eyes aren't quite right. My glasses aren't quite right. I haven't learned it enough yet. But when I've got certainty that it is yellow, that seeing of the truth is what completely annihilates from my mind the lie. So that was a thought in my mind. Do you agree? And it did leave my mind. Do you agree? Okay. That's how you get enlightened. Because an enlightened mind is a mind that is in sync with truth. There's nothing left over. There's whatever it cognizes is as it is. Conventional truth, ultimate truth, you name it. It sees that which exists. That which exists. And that's the key thing. In Buddhist philosophy, you learn these very synonyms for that which exists. It's a crucial point. Established base, they call it. Phenomenon, object of knowledge, existent. I can't think of the other synonyms. Existent, the definition of an existent. This is a point that's so different from, say, the creative religion. An existent is that which can be cognized by mind. Obviously, it has to be a valid mind, and there's various ways of proving what is a valid mind. It's not complicated. Valid. It has to be a valid cognition. So therefore, it's axiomatic that that which exists is necessarily that which is cognized by mind, and that which is cognized by valid mind is that which exists. So an omniscient mind, which is the mind that's fully removed all the pollution from it, is a mind that's now in sync with reality. Whatever the reality might be. Cup, flower, emptiness, doesn't matter. That sort of big holy thing in the sky. That Buddha says is the natural state of mind. That, Buddha says, is what minds are capable of. That's the job of a mind. That's the potential of minds. And that's the job, that's the potential we're trying to accomplish. And why would we want to? Because believing in lies is what's causing all the torment. All the rebirths, all the hell realms, all the God realms, all the animal realms, all the human realms, all the suffering, all the torment. The lies run the show. And those lies are what create karma and produce results. That's another discussion altogether now. That's another whole discussion. I'm using the word lie loosely here. I'm not talking about telling lies in that sense. I'm talking about the delusions in our mind such that when they arise in the mind, they cause things to not appear correctly to us. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Are we communicating, people? Yeah. Yeah. Lies. Yes. Yes, we've got enough virtue in us to see each other now and recognise our good qualities and be kind to each other, only if we don't threaten each other too deeply. As long as we all behave nicely, we're prepared to like each other, aren't we? I mean, look what happens when we start living too close and start living before we kill each other. So we've got enough virtue, enough positive states of mind. We can see things relatively reasonably. Our eyes work, our ears work. We're reasonably fed. We're reasonably sane. We're not seeing worms coming out of your eyes, So we're reasonably virtuous, and that's pretty fortunate, aren't we? But we're still riddled with attachment, aversion, jealousy, all the other things, not to mention the root delusion called ego grasping, which pervades everything, causes everything to appear inherent to us, which is the deepest mistake of all and the hardest one to see. Yeah, sure, that's right. And that's why Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, when we have finally seen the truth of the cup, which means the emptiness of the inherent existence of the cup, it's as if there's no cup. But there is. But what does exist, he says, is so subtle. It's as if it's an illusion. So even that can sound trippy, but don't get trippy, because the Buddha would just have their cup and enjoy it. You know, you said, what do the Buddha see? They just see cups and toilets and goods and bads and ups and downs. There wouldn't have any drama about it. Not to mention they see past and future and everything else in your mind as well. That exists, so they can see it right there. No mistake. So this is what's hard for us to see, how this ego grasping, which is the root delusion, can see something out there as inherent in and of itself, separate from us, and then how attachment makes it look more delicious than it is, and aversion makes it look more ugly than it is, and all the other dramas. And this is what our job is, just to first learn the word and then slowly unpack these lies from the mind. And this is the point that Buddha's making, which is really radical, because you ask anybody in the materialist models of the mind, the materialist psychology, they will all absolutely say that ego and anger and instinct for survival and attachment and jealousy and depression are natural states. We reinforce them. In fact, we mean by natural, but you'd actually be unnatural if you didn't have them. That's why we wouldn't believe Lama Zopa's experience of, not having any fear when he's drowning, or a child, whatever. Unusual experience isn't fitting our model of attachment and ego, which is very scary, because that's what we think is normal. And of course we think it's normal because we don't know anybody who hasn't got it. I remember reading one time, actually, one of the stories years ago, one of these many women who'd been, I think it's in Austria, that one, remember? One woman who'd been in prison for like years, 20 years, I think, had babies from him, many, many babies. And then she came out and she wrote books, and she appeared to not be so much suffering. Nobody believed her. Nobody believed that she wasn't suffering. We all assume you'd have to have trauma and incredible pain and suffering, because that's the normal response of an ordinary person with attachment and ego, People simply didn't believe her. Yeah. This is what Buddha's saying. It's kind of outrageous. It's shocking what he's saying. Really. That they're adventitious. They're not at the core of our being. They therefore can be removed. And that's the job. All of Buddha's practice is based upon this simple point. So we better check it out really carefully and get some confidence in it. Don't just blindly believe it. Because for us, it feels true. We're like all the other psychologists, of course, because psychology is made up by people like you and me, who have ego, who have attachment. I mean, it feels like it's real. It feels like it's the core of our being, doesn't it? It seems so spontaneous, the way we respond to them. When we understand Buddha's explanation of them, then we can see how they're just instinctive habits, that's all. And we can change habits. And then we have to try to understand logically how these neurotic emotions have this delusional component, to really analyze how when you're seeing something through the filter of anger, you're distorting it. It's so obvious, Like, what's your name? Steve. You. Steve. What's a funny what's that? So spontaneous. What's your name? Who? Spell it, Petal. Oh, you're an Irishman, that's right. How do you spell it? How do you say it? Porrick. You really say it like that? That's proper Irish. Podrick. Your mummy says Podrick, which is what we mean by Patrick, is it? Podrick. Porrick. You just say Porrick, do you? Okay, Porrick. There he is. Porrick. All right. So let's say, I'll get the story now. I haven't examined it. Oh yeah. Let's say Porrick left me for a younger version. It's such a classic one. We know this very deeply, but we don't apply this teaching to it. We know that I was in love with Porrick, for the 6 months. And of course he looked divine to me. We know that. But we don't analyze it in this way. We have all these romantic notions about it, why he looks so divine to me. Well, it's very simple why, because my attachment's gone berserk. So attachment, remember, analyze it. It's this coming from the practice in the past, because it runs the show for all of us. I'm born with this deep, instinctive feeling of dissatisfaction. That's its main disease at an energetic level. A deep feeling of dissatisfaction, an aching feeling that I haven't got enough, that I'm not enough. And then as we know, that no matter what I get, it's never enough. So therefore, naturally, that instinctive feeling of dissatisfaction, which is the leftover of past attachment, then gives rise to the new attachment, the new craving. I must find something. So, of course, the obvious first level of attachment is to grasp onto the objects of the senses, which is people and smells and tastes and touch and this kind of thing, you know. But not only that, if we look at the deeper level of attachment, which really is the one that does run the show, which is what they talk about when they talk about the 8 worldly dharmas, this strange phrase. This deep level of attachment, which is the level of assumption. Because of this ego grasping, which is the instinctive belief in this separate inherent me, which has literally caused me to have this experience and to be a separate me in this human form, in all these other human forms. This whole dualistic thing of me and you is a complete fabrication made up by delusion. It's a complete thing we've made up. So I'm this separate me. Then I'm this girl form, and I want boy form. So my main attachment, the deeper one that drives me, is the terrible need to be seen by others, to be approved of by others. We call it to have others love me. Because why? Because this attachment is so diseased, it thinks I'm nothing. There's no proper awareness of self at all in a healthy way. There's just like this empty vessel walking around like a vampire craving the blood, you know. This dissatisfaction. Then you go, at the gross level, you want the food, the this, the that. And then the bigger one, you want to be loved and approved of, this other half fantasy we have. So I go looking, Now I forget your name again. Podrick, what? Porrick. Okay, Porrick. So then, my eyes are looking for this boy all the time. Isn't it? You're checking the world all the time. You're looking all the time, assessing the ones that pop up in relation to the fantasy you've got. And then he comes along, and the eyes glob on him, And karma ripens. We've got some history together. He's looking for his other half, I'm looking for my other half. So all this attachment, which is running all of this, there might be some love and compassion in there, but really, I'm sorry, not much. I might be a kind person, and I will be kind to him when I've got him. But of course I'll be kind to him, because he's doing what my attachment wants. This is why we first confuse the love and attachment so totally, it's just unbearably embarrassing. I actually think I've got incredible love for him. When he's sick, I'll spend all night taking care of him. Of course I will. Like for my baby, because I'm massively attached. I have massive vested interest. This is attachment, running the show. This massive attachment. So when you find the object that suits the attachment, then, and so this huge feeling, so this is how they talk in Tantra too, because this attachment is triggered, and then this object is very pleasing to my attachment, it triggers incredibly nice feelings in my body. Incredibly nice feelings. Which is what we call happy feelings. Which is what we are junkies for. Which is why we have any objects of the senses, period, to trigger a good feeling. This is the nature of the desire realm that we live in. We are junkies for good feelings. And of course, the chocolate cake just doesn't do the same thing as Boris does for me, does it? So he triggers incredibly good feelings in me. So the more good feelings are triggered in me, the more divine he looks. It alters your view. It literally completely alters your view. And he will look that much more divine. And everything else will as well. We know that when you're in love, which is attachment gone mad. Like you're having a mental breakdown. It's called attachment. Everything's all sparkly. Because it triggers this energy in you. It triggers these feelings. Of course, it's completely blissful. And of course, you think he's the cause of it. So, of course, the other aspect of attachment is kicking in now, which is the vampire that absolutely has to have him, has to keep him, hold him, have him, look at him, taste him, touch him every single day. And it's like a nightmare if you don't have him. We know all this one. All this is attachment. And we call it normal, we call it romantic love, we call it you name it, This is what runs, not yet, this is what runs this world we live in. So along with this, Aren't I fortunate? I might have some love and compassion, so might he. So we in the beginning, all the excitement is there. And then eventually, like we all know, and this is the point, because this attachment is a complete lie. Be clear here. The feeling of pleasure in the mind and the body is not attachment. That's pleasure. It's very simple. It's called pleasure. Nothing wrong with pleasure. Nothing wrong with good feelings. There's nothing deluded about good feelings. They're just what they are. They're wonderful. But we have this wrong view about what caused it. We have all these misconceptions about what caused the good feelings. The fact is, when you learn to meditate, to get single point of concentration, you will trigger that capacity for bliss in your own mind without having to rely on any bodies at all. This is Buddha's whole point. My friend Renee, Swiss monk, lives in California. He told me, we interviewed him in Mandalay. I first did Mandalay in 95 with FMT magazine. And we interviewed him about one of his retreats. And he said, Robina, no question. He said he was doing the single point of concentration retreat a couple of years, doing through the 9 stages. He said he got about to the 5th stage of this particular retreat. And he said there was no question, I'm paraphrasing here, that the bliss, the joy he experienced in his mind, which clearly is a slightly subtle level of mind than the gross one, was so superior to any pleasure he'd ever had through his senses. This is mental, not physical, not sensory. Nothing to do with the gross senses, which is like pig level. Because this is Buddha's simple point, that the capacity of this mind to be blissful, to be loving, to be compassionate, to be virtuous, to be blissful, they all come together, is infinite. But we are like these animals, junkies, craving vampire junkies, that desperate to trigger pleasure, and nothing wrong with that, but we don't know the proper cause of pleasure. We think having product is the cause of pleasure. We think having food is the cause of pleasure. In other words, the only way in these donkey bodies we have, the only way we know how to trigger those pleasant feelings is to have boys or food. Whereas through meditation, through accessing your own mind, going beyond the gross level, where all the nonsense is, all the drama is in the senses, you go to the subtler level, where bliss is just natural. Because temporarily, the gross levels of consciousness have ceased, and you just naturally experience bliss. This is the nature of our mind. So we have all this wrong view of why I get blissful. And because we don't know how else to get the feeling, so I've got to keep having product. And so that makes him look divine. So the bliss is nothing wrong. That's not attachment. The body is nothing wrong. That's not attachment. Attachment is not a function of the body. Attachment is a conceptual state of mind in my mental consciousness from deep habit that has all these different consequences, like the feeling of neediness, the feeling of nothingness, the feeling of dissatisfaction from the habit of attachment, that then is constantly searching every single second of my day, even though I'm looking like a normal person living my life, but in my mind never stopping, thinking about where's that boy, how is he, go to this party, go to that one, looking up on the internet, blah, until my eyes land on product. Like a vampire looking, desperate, this attachment driving me to get what I want. Then, because I'm so excited, all the anticipation built up, and now I've found him, so now he's going to look totally divine to me. My attachment's lying to me now more. All of this happening, and all the bliss and pleasure coming, and all this, the novel written for the next 80 years. Finally, I found happiness. All this setup, all this drama, this lies, this huge novel I'm writing in my head, non-stop, frantically. All the function of attachment. Lies, fantasies, projections, nonsense. And then coming along with it, this vampirish demand when I finally get him, this expectation, this massive expectation that he must fulfill the fantasy I just wrote. This is the cruelest one of all. The fantasy that he's perfect, that he will make me happy, that he has made me happy, that we will be together till we're 80, that he is this and he is this. That's my fantasy that I have written, that my desperate attachment has written. And that I project that onto him. So, of course, what's going to happen? We get close, live in the same bed, and he farts in the sheets instead of the toilet. Well, I kind of laugh first. Then he comes home late a bit, and I kind of get a bit upset and start panicking, think he's got another girlfriend. He comes home 5 minutes and he tells me he loves me and I'm really okay again. But it doesn't take long, does it, for attachment to get thwarted? And then all the stories and the dramas. He's 10 minutes late and already I want to kill him when he walks in the door. Jealousy arises, anger arises, and then he looks revolting to me. Then we fight and he loves me again and I love him again. We have great sex again. And then this can't last long, can it? It's exhausting. But if there is love and kindness and generosity and patience and forgiveness in the mix, then it might end up being a reasonable relationship. When all the other stuff dies down, you look fat and ugly and you don't mind. But on the other hand, he might get really bored because his attachment is even more than mine, and after a while I'm boring for him. Of course he is. Of course I am, because that's what attachment has. Everything that looks so divine and perfect first, and then after a while it starts to look jaded. We know that. And why? Because attachment is not sustainable, because it's a lie. So attachment can only go to two places, indifference or aversion, nowhere else. So I wake up one morning and he's either ugly to me or he looks boring to me, one or the other, if attachment's running the show. And then I'll chuck him out for another version, or he'll chuck me out, whichever one. We all recognise this. This is called attachment. And the consequence of it is all the other things. And it's just so intensely, so sophisticated a story, it's almost hard to unpack it all. So it's a conceptual state of mind, but so primordially programmed from countless lives that the energy of it is this dissatisfaction. It's created the cause to be a human being as a separate mind from him and everybody else in this weird world with trees and suns and moons and this and that. And it runs the show. It's the motor that runs the show. It's what propels everything we think and do and say. The craving to be comfortable, the craving to have food, the craving to have nice words, the craving to have a good reputation, the craving to get things. It just never ends. And the extent to which attachment gets what it wants is what we call happiness. And then it doesn't last. And then becomes suffering. And then we keep going. Life after life after life after life after life. Is what this is. So is what I'm packing to do. Unraveling. And it needs really clear mind, because this attachment isn't the only story. There's other stuff all intertwined there, including the virtues. And it's very hard to see, impossible to see in the beginning, the difference between the love I have for him and the attachment I have for him. We can guarantee it's mostly driven by attachment. And as Vajrasattva says, we do have love and compassion for some people, there's no doubt, but it's not stable because it's based on attachment. But when he does leave me, attachment, because now attachment has been thwarted and it turns into pain and grief and anger and jealousy, and then love is turned off like a tap, and it probably turns into anger. Wanting to suffer. Now another lie takes over. He's evil, he's monstrous, he's this, it's the cause of all my suffering. So we're completely living in fantasies. We do not see, even you see, just the habit of the fisherman, because of fishing in past life. He went fishing every day. His mummy, who didn't happen to be attached to fishing, what she saw, that one time she went fishing with him, she saw suffering fish. It was very obvious to her. He never saw suffering fish. He couldn't. Even though they were moving and flapping in his boat, he didn't interpret suffering fish, because the story he had was an attachment story. That's why when you read things about like these torturers, it's too disgusting for us to think about this, but we must. You read about remember that one guy in Kansas? Bind, torture, kill. He called himself BTK. Remember him? In the 80s, maybe. I read all the stories in the newspapers. Yeah. He called himself Bind, Torture, Kill. And for like 35 years, he had this secret life. Of course, you have to have a secret life. If you're like torturing people, you can't do it in public, can you? If that guy had attachment to killing poodles, he would have to have a secret life. You couldn't afford to go out there killing poodles every day. You'd be hanged and quartered, wouldn't you? We're attached to poodles and not fish. Okay, so this fellow was a nice guy, lived this life. And when we understand the explanation of karma, it kind of makes sense, You can understand it. So there he was, nice Christian man, went to church and had a wife and family, but his secret life, and this is the point if you think about karma, he had these strong addictions to torturing and killing people. He killed like 20 people over the years and never got found out. Eventually got found out. So and this sounds hideous to us, we just think he's like this devil from hell, But all he's got, instead of attachment to killing fish, let's face it, that's torture. The way fish die, you could say it's torture. We don't call it torture because we're all used to killing fish. Bashing baby seals on their heads to the baby seal killers, that's not torture. That's just what their daddies taught them, isn't it? I remember seeing in the interview on the telly, they were really offended by all these animal rights people telling them they were torturing. That's just what they do. They're taught to bash baby seals to death. While it's evident to any person with a half a brain the baby seal's not happy. You understand? It's obvious to any person, the mother seeing the fish were tortured. They were desperate to be in that water, please. But he couldn't see it because he's blinded by his own attachment, his own story. So these torturers, this BTK, because there's no death row in Kansas, because he had to, he had to confess to everything. There's no point in not confessing. He had to confess, he had to tell the story, every single bind, torture, kill that he did. It was kind of grotesque, because he had this. So we have to first ask the question then. If the tendency to kill fish comes from past killing, and if the tendency to, like sex comes from attachment to bodies, and if attachment to torture, where does that come from? Attachment to torturing. Well, as much as we don't like to think about it, guess what? From the animal realm. If you take this model of the mind, the Buddhas, and refer to all beings, then you're going to see grotesque ego grasping in animals, massive, trillion times more intense than ours, unbelievable attachment to get what they want, intense aversion, and look at the aggression the mummy lion uses to get what she wants. And talk about ignorant. There's this fisherman not seeing that fish are suffering. Well, believe me, that mummy lion cannot see the buffalo screaming in agony as she's ripping its guts out for breakfast. She can't see, utterly ignorant, because she's overwhelmed by her own craving. This is the depth of attachment. But as blind as a bat, she can't see suffering. Of course, we just say, oh, that's just animals, that's natural, So if we've all had all these past lives, then a person who's born in this life, in a human life, has a powerful tendency to torture. Guess where it came from? Past habits. So, of course, he's not comfortable torturing this life publicly. And he had this whole drama. And that's what attachment does. Look at your own mind. It makes up really elaborate stories. We call them fantasies. The fisherman lived in his world, in his mind as a fisherman, even called himself salmon, Sal, He thought of fishing all day. He was addicted to fishing. He had to go fishing. He went fishing, taught fish, sold fish, had fish. This just completely, that was his entire life. We all like this. Depends on what we're attached to. You think about it all the time. You want it. We can see. So this torturer, he had this elaborate ways of having to torture people. He'd catch the wife and the mother, or let's say the mother and the daughter. And he'd have all this elaborate scenario. He'd been imprisoned, and then he would torture, like hang them up, and then harm them so they're suffering and freaking out, and then slowly kill them. I forget what he did. Dreadful details. And he basically said he got his orgasm from this. Now, I'm not trying to be horrible, ridiculous here, but what an orgasm is, what sexual pleasure is just because of very strong attachment. The attachment to chocolate cake and the attachment to porridge is no different. It's just a degree. That's all. The over-exaggeration of the deliciousness of the cake and the wanting to have it, the over-exaggeration of his deliciousness and wanting to have his contact with him. And obviously because of the nature of the body, having physical contact and all the berserkness of the body brings much more pleasure than the chocolate cake. That's evident. But the principle is the same. The principle is the same. All these examples I use, there's this little fisherman. There's this other example. I remember reading in Vanity Fair years ago about the furries. This group of people, more and more you read about it now, more and more and more. It's incredible. Whole television shows about people who identify as being animals. I read recently. And some of them truly, like this English boy, and he's got a wife, they talked about he is a wolf. I am a wolf. For intended purposes, I'm a wolf. thinks like a wolf, acts like a wolf, identifies with wolves, wants to fantasize wolves. All these furries they dress up in animal clothing, and have their conferences in hotels and do all these things with their old world, their old way of talking. They totally identify with animals. And this particular group of them, their favourite object of sexual contact is stuffed toys. Furries, they call themselves. He said he tried for a while having sex, this particular boy, with human size appropriate animals such as German shepherds, but he prefers his stuffed toys. Now this really proves emptiness. It proves the mind makes things up. You go into the shop, you buy a piece of felt, you cut it into the shape of an animal, you put eyes on it, and then you get turned on. It's quite cheap, isn't it? Easy. It's easy to get turned on. You just do that. It proves emptiness, and our minds make everything up, and it's past habit. So where does that come from? Attachment to animals, attachment to pets, attachment to cartoons, personified animals. Even all the furries say it's like cartoon-like. Everything we think and think, it leaves an imprint. Everything. We bring this stuff with us. And we are in degenerate, not yet, please, keep it. Oh, sorry, you're stretching. It's degenerate times. So there's this little fisherman. He said, not the fisherman, there's a fisherman, there's a little boy attached to fishing. He might get orgasm, but he's got pleasure. There's this torturer. I remember reading about, what's his name, years ago, one of these guys, multi-murderer. Can't remember his name. One guy, he's quite well known. Who? Jeffrey Dahmer, that's the one. Jeffrey Dahmer, not child member. He said from the time he was a tiny boy, he was compelled to talk to the creatures and got pleasure from it. He didn't say sexual pleasure, he got pleasure. Compelled. So we've got to understand that that's what attachment is. So, so there's the boy who's attached to fishing. There's this boy attached to torturing. My friend Panos, when he was 6, walking down the street in Athens with his Greek Orthodox mummy, he sees a half-naked lady on a cinema poster. Mummy, why is my penis standing up? Of course, she's mortified. And, then the lady cracks a joke at the cinema and said he's going to be a lady killer. Sure enough, he was addicted to, Panos was old-fashioned. He was addicted to girls, sex, he's normal, isn't he? Addicted to having sex with toys, that's weird. He said when he used to go, this boy, he was 6, he'd go to the school sports, and he'd get turned on by the Mickey Mouse mascot. Of course, he thought he was weird until he started discovering his people called furries on the internet. So the point is, because in the West we don't have any logical reason why, this is why it's a bit tragic. We don't have logical reasons why we'd be this way. We then think it's our human right to be this way. So all these people now wanting to be like animals, more and more, and all the people doing the plastic surgery to make them look like animals. It's my human right. They all walk around being so sad because they've got no human rights. Well, soon it'll be allowed to be animal human rights. It's a bit depressing. What to do? Degenerate time. Karmic imprint. Habit of doing something, and then when you meet it again, you yearn it, crave it, and it's divine. You desperately got to do it again. And this is the tragedy. Because it feels good, we have to deduce it must be good. Until, of course, it's something society doesn't agree with. Like the BTK guy who do it in private. Fishing, no one minds. Some people object to fishing, but most people don't. Attachment. Unbelievable. Terrifying. Runs the show completely every single second. Every second. Because we are in the nature of something. This world we live in, attachment. This realm is a product of attachment. That's how come we have bodies with holes in them that need filling. It's the nature of this world we live in. It's all pervasive something. No escape until we change our minds, and it's immensely difficult because it runs us every second. And it's a liar. It's a liar. It's a state of mind, a conceptual thought that makes something appear more delicious than it really is and causes you to hanker after it and believe that when I get it, I'll get happy. That's the bare bones function of attachment. So because we can see how pervasive it is at an emotional level and from life to life, it's like a joke to call it a conceptual thought. But that's what it boils down to. And when we can understand that technically, intellectually, we can understand how we can change it. And that's why the first step is control your body and speech. First step, humble first step, control your body and speech. slowly, slowly, and then with much work in our minds. Amazing work with a single point of concentration, understanding the mind, much purification, we can begin to unravel these delusions and stop believing in them and slowly rid them from our mind. So there's a question. That question is so heavy I can't even hear it. Can you put it another way for me? So the terrible, depressing assumption in your question is that the only reason you go to meditate is to get a good feeling and say, fuck everybody else. It's a horrific concept. It's horrific what you're saying. What Buddha's saying is that when you've given up delusions and given up craving and given up attachment and being a junkie, then you'll begin to discover your own bliss. And then out of this comes love and compassion. Just, to get bliss just to satisfy, then screw humans it's like monstrous concept. The assumption is the only reason to have bliss is to make me happy, which is like a junkie. Don't bother going to meditate. Just go have lots of sex. It's easier and more fun, if that's the purpose. This bliss, Buddha says, is the nature of your mind that comes naturally with virtue when you have rid your mind of delusions. That's the point. There's no way in the universe a person with delusions can even do concentration. They can't concentrate long enough because they're such greedy buggers for what they want. They've got their senses. There can be people, indeed, where you have, from past lives, some capacity to meditate. And then out of incredibly self-centered motivation, will get some bliss in your meditation straight to the lower realms. Forget it. Monstrous. Nothing to do with even the point. Bliss is your natural state, and it comes with virtue. Virtues are naturally blissful. This is the point the Buddha is making. And the only way to access all that is by ridding your mind of delusions. Okay. What do you mean by attracted, darling? Who are you talking about here? What do you mean my teacher? Why are you mentioning my teacher? What's he got to do with the price of fish? What do you mean, sweetheart? When they discovered their own reality. What kind of relationship? What are you talking about? You mean sex? Well, what are you saying then, darling? What are you saying, sweetheart? You mean sex. No, sweetheart, please excuse me. The only reason two people come together to be, as you call it, intimate, is attachment. Listen to me. Listen to me. When you have as you get more advanced, as we get more advanced spiritually, what that means is we get less needy, less attached, less jealous, less angry, less depressed, more loving, more empathetic, more content, more kind. Can you hear that? So why would you go yearning for some intimate relationship when you're already highly realized and full of love and compassion? You will love everybody and have great fun with everybody. And if it's the karma to get married and have 14 babies, you'll do it. But it certainly won't be what drives you. It'll be bodhicitta and compassion that drives you to do it, not the usual pathetic craving to be seen by others and heard by others and have them touch and feel us. That's just animal action, which is called attachment. I'm not trying to be brutal here, but I sort of am being. A person who's realized is a person who's compassionate and loving and wise and wants only to help people. And it also happens to be that they are totally content. The only purpose of relationships then would be to be of benefit. And that could include having fun because you're a fun-loving person. You don't walk around looking all holy when you're like that. That's what I'm saying. Of course it is. The only reason now is ordinary, pathetic people like us. If you're a bodhisattva, darling, there's a whole other discussion. I just answered it. I said it. But is it satisfied you, the answer? Due to karma, they might have a relationship, of course, but not from the same reason as us. God, no. That's just because we're all junkies. Good. Okay. Thank you. We got there. Yes, Mark. Go on. It's an excellent practice. Yeah. The same. You analyse the logic of it. The really to be. Well, that's one example. But of course, I mean, what practice means is every minute doing what you can with what you've got. So when we understand attachment, the more we understand, and it takes time, Mark. It takes time to understand this attachment. Experiential, it takes time. So what else is loneliness? Analyze what loneliness is. Loneliness is feeling there's no one to hear me and see me. This proves the deepest attachment, which is the one for reputation and having nice words. That's what, Mark? Mark, I said it takes time, but you've got to start somewhere. It's like saying, I want to make $20 million. Oh, God, I've got none. You've got to start somewhere and know it's possible. And you do your best each step of the way. Mark, what's your point? You're very brave to put your hand up timidly. Enough, I think. Maybe enough. Think about it, please. Slowly, Mark. You can't be perfect overnight. You can't be a Buddha overnight. But we've got to understand. This is the point. This is what we're trying to do here, is give Buddha's explanation of loneliness, sad, needy, this, that. That's all. And then if you're trying to live according to Buddha's ones, you apply it the best of your ability. Because if you don't understand what the disease is, how can you ever cure it? It's all we can do every moment. So it is good to hear that loneliness is just because of attachment. Don't be brutal to yourself because of it. We're all the same. But Mark, as soon as you speak this way, you're not understanding what I'm talking about. You have to start somewhere. You start with a thought. When you play piano, what you're saying is this. I've just told you how to play piano. And you say, oh, Robina, I do hear it, and I understand the theory, but I keep stumbling. And I do understand it intellectually, but how to put it into practice? Shut up, Mark, and just keep practicing is the answer. Just shut up and keep practicing. You've got this bizarre expectation that because you understand it intellectually, it should somehow work immediately. I don't know where you got that idea from. You've got to start somewhere, which is the intellectual thought. So be content with that. And go one step at a time. Are you hearing me? So nothing more to say, okay? 4:40. Every day gets more loud, doesn't it? Let's be a retreat. He's shouting and yelling. I know, I've got to warm them. I've got to calm down again, start slowly. So it's 4:40. What time? Today we're going to finish a bit early because some people are leaving at 6, and because also tonight we've got another thing on tonight. Today is one of those special days. What's the day? The 25th of the. It's one of the days in the Tibetan calendar where we do this particular prayer puja thing that's happening in here. So if you got at 7:30 instead of our meditation, there'll be this Lama Sherpa puja. So we'll just sit in all our seats, and then the monks and nuns will sit, however many monks there are, I don't know, we'll just change the chairs and sit in the front row, and then people who come from outside will sit in the back. And it's 7:30, and we have the texts, and we'll just join in or sit there and meditate or whatever you want to do. Okay? Yeah. It'll be prayers. It'll be reading this particular puja called Lama Sherpa. And it's a particular practice in relation to seeing the Buddha as the Lama, and then making prayers and requests and offerings to the Lama as the Buddha, called Lama Sherpa. Would be, the monk Gyatso will lead it, and you want to sing along in Tibetan, or you just read the words, or you just do something else, read your other books, whatever you like. It's a separate book, sweetheart. They'll give us that book. Yeah, they'll give us that book. Yeah. Okay. So are we communicating about attachment? Oh, I know. I know. Yeah, sure. But as Lama Zopa said, he said, Lama Yeshe said, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year, but we will never begin to understand it until we work inside. Now, I'm not saying I know much. I don't. I know where I'm at, truly. But anything I do say about attachment isn't because it's not just coming from the books. I've read the books. I've studied it. You get the bare bones instructions, and then you, based on your own experience. So I can, I'm still caught up in it. Believe me. Because it goes to such deep levels. But you can get some sense of the horror of it, And that can only just takes time. It just takes time. Internalize it. Just take time. Recognize it. See it. How utterly pervasive it is. Right. Yeah. That's right. That's why. Well, I think. I know, but I think it's. Don't say people. Say we. That's better. We. We are caught up in the world of attachment, created by attachment, by our past attachment. We created the cause. We even have this separate body with holes in it that need filling. We did that. It's the product of attachment. The universe itself is the product of attachment. All the objects are the objects of attachment. It's pervaded by attachment. It is this what Buddha calls it the desire realm. But the big point I began with, and the point I want to finish with again on this topic just now, is that all of this intense, entire universal drama, all of it is the outcropping of this attachment, the result of attachment, that you get attachment right down to the bare bones. It's a conceptual state of mind that exaggerates the deliciousness of something and believes that when I get it, I'll get happy. That's what it is in its bare bones. And that is a delusion. It's a lie. And when we can see how it is a lie, then by going against it and purifying it and arguing with it and not feeding it, and then through meditation, slowly we can literally, like the red cup, we can see the truth. We can see through the lie to see the truth. That's when it will stop. And that's every delusion in the mind, all the way down to ego grasping. These are conceptual thoughts that are not in sync with reality. And eventually we can, by thinking about how things do exist, which is dependent arising, this will be the logic we can use to disprove these lies, and which are eventually what remove them from the mind. That's what should give us confidence. for one little break. Come back and we'll finish at 6. 10 to 5, 48, something like that. 48, yeah. Okay, so come back 20 minutes. Come back at 10 past 5. Oh yes, that's where you're going to be after done. Come on. Please leave it. Lee and I met years ago in prison. Thanks very much. Thank you.